Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I am Lawton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we're the Duality of Man. And another day, another possible precursor to World War III.
Yeah, today we're
Who had
talking about
Palestine on their Apocalypse bingo card?
the Israel-Palestine conflict and just how unbelievably brutal it's been, and the reaction that a lot of people have had to it because it's revealed who they truly are, like as if we didn't already know, but at least now it's in such stark contrast to what is
The mask is
actually.
not there anymore. The mask has been thrown into a volcano and smelted.
Yeah, these people can't hide anymore.
They don't even want to, is the thing. They think they're in the moral right for the shit they spew.
But let's get let's start off by talking about what exactly happened. Okay, so a few weeks ago, Hamas, the violent terrorist group that controls Gaza, launched an attack into Israel on multiple fronts, and I'm just gonna say, butchered a ton of innocent people, including people who were attending a nearby music festival. They assaulted the women. They kid, killed the men. They also kidnapped over 100 people. They killed children. They killed elderly people. They did not care. And some of the people that they kidnapped weren't even Israeli citizens. Some of them were Americans. Some of them were Canadians. They were like citizens from like multiple different countries who were there who all ended up getting dragged into this.
Yep.
So, in response, Israel launched an attack back, which, I mean, what did you expect them to do? Like, this was a vicious attack, which, you know, there's there's no way a nation doesn't respond to this kind of violence.
Especially because of the aforementioned foreign individuals there as well, makes it basically an international incident.
Yeah. And, you know, Israel attacked in response, and, now there are people who support Israel talking about the, you know, you know, unmitigated savagery of the attack committed by Hamas, and people who are pro-Palestine talking about how Israel is in apartheid, how badly the condition is in Gaza.
It's the Western world's fault, and of course, the Muslims are a foreign culture, therefore, they are sanctified by the blood of victimhood.
You know,
Straight up
even
orcophobia. Straight
again,
up orcophobia.
even if the people of Palestine had an issue with you know Israel the state, like the slaughtering of these innocent people, like there is no condition in the world that justifies that kind of behavior. But the Palestinians and the people who support Palestine says that any member of Israel, just because they are a citizen of Israel, is automatically an enemy combatant and a worthy target of attack. That's their view, not mine.
hmm And never mind the Declaration of Sentiments or the Geneva Convention or international law or war crime tribunals or there is literally no standard for humanization here what so goddamn ever. They do not view each other as human, and it is straight up warfare that would make any given person's definition of hell seem like a walk in a fresh meadow.
And you know, they say that say that you shouldn't blame, you know, Palestinians for the actions of Hamas, but when you see pro-Palestine rallies in cities all over the world cheering for the actions of Hamas, and I've seen video of people in Palestine talking about what they want to do to the nation of Israel and the Jewish people, like they may not be active members of Hamas, but they definitely support and condone the actions taken, which
It's not like this. It's not like this is nowhere found in the Quran or the Hadith or any other significant Muslim text. This religion was founded basically by a theocratically motivated warlord, and he wanted to eradicate other religions.
you know, and people talking about how we should do surgical strikes against Hamas, but while I agree that you should not target civilians and that you should try to avoid civilian casualties as much as possible, my question is, given how thoroughly the hatred of uh, the Jewish people permeates not just Hamas but all of Palestine and their allies around the world. Like even if you got rid of Hamas, how do you make peace with the people afterwards? Because they still vehemently hate you as well.
It's an ideologically motivated thing. They believe that these people are morally inferior subhumans because of their beliefs.
And so, like, as long as I honestly don't know how you can, you know, ultimately resolve this situation for good without something terrible happening.
Well, the correct answer, I think, is non-interventionism. Get every Western person out of there and leave them to their own devices. Let them figure it out for themselves sooner or later. And honestly, at this point, that is the only correct answer. It's just we need to stop meddling because the meddling is exasperating the problem. And if we would just get ourselves out of everything over there, that entire section of the world just needs to be sectioned off until they, a century from now, get their shit together. Because if if we don't get ourselves out of there, and if we don't stop meddling, all it's going to do is spread the contagion via alleged refugees, if nothing else. And frankly, while I'm fond of some of the bells and whistles of Muslim or Israeli culture, they are stuck in basically a medieval mindset. And I'm sorry, but I don't want to see a medieval style crusade fought with modern weapons. And I don't want to see the Western world end up like Rome during the fall because we keep importing these people. They are they literally have the same mindset as people from the ninth century. And there are people on both sides with that same mindset. So we need to just get the fuck out, stay the fuck out, and essentially wait until the red mist clears. Because as harsh and inhumane as that is at this point, it is the only way we are ever going to see a positive end to this. It is the only way we're ever going to get to the point where there's going to be a Protestant Reformation style reform in these parts of the world. Because yes, the rank and file Muslims in these parts of the world and the rank and file people of these various countries don't share these radical sympathies, but enough of them do, and they hold enough positions of power that for cooler heads to prevail, we need to basically let the radicals burn themselves out. In my
But
opinion, anyway.
for example, it's not just the Israelis who have a problem with the people of Palestine. Like they also share a border with Egypt, and the Egyptians have closed off their border to them as well, saying they will not take any refugees from Gaza because these people are so radical. They know that if they allow them into their country, they will violently disrupt it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that also is going to have to be a standard. We all need to take the Poland approach at this point. Um, there is there is no good side here. There is no good ending here apart from leave them alone for a century or so, let all the radicals burn themselves out, and let whatever cooler heads exist in the aftermath rebuild civilization from the ground up, because that is how fucked we are at this point. We They need to be left alone so they can rebuild their civilization basically in isolation. And when that is done, then we can start including them in the rest of the Western world. As much as I hate the adults in the room mentality, I think it's reasonable to conclude the Western world, particularly the Anglosphere, are the adults in the room, and the people whose politics and religious views basically are still stuck somewhere in the early Middle Ages are not the adults in the room. So let them violently tantrum in isolation and not affect the rest of the world until they finally grow the fuck up.
Well, one of the things that I've seen is that one of their major complaints is that look at what terrible conditions the people of Gaza have to live in, and I think one of the reasons that is because Hamas, who was elected um, decades ago, and then once they got into power, destroyed all of their opposition and just remained in power. They pour literally everything they have into trying to fight against Israel. Like I've seen actual video of them destroying their own, water systems to take the pipes up to turn them into rockets to fire at Israel.
Yeah, they literally don't care about their own people. They don't care about their own infrastructure. It's literally a medieval mindset. And it's not Islam itself or Muslims themselves that do this. It is specifically the radicals who got in power in the late 70s, largely with Western help, as shameful as that is, and took a civilization that was relatively on par with America from the 70s and turned it back into a medieval style theocracy. And they have not gotten better in the time that we have tried to civilize and democratize them. In fact, they have resisted violently every urge to civilize and democratize them to the point that they get more radical as we go. And that means that the vast majority of people living in these countries live in squalor and barely qualify as um, first or second world infrastructure because everyone apart from the sultans are living in squalor.
I mean, that's partly because, you know, like Western countries will literally, give them money in the for like the purposes of aid and things, but the people in charge will literally just take it, hoard it for themselves, and leave the people to suffer on their own. Like this is like this is something that I heard today, and I literally could not believe it whenever I read it. But our president Joe Biden, on his trip to the region, promised $100 million in aid to Gaza, while we are also simultaneously, you know, America regularly gives raids to Israel, but Biden promised $100 million in aid to Gaza. Now, they say that purpose is for humanitarian efforts. Do you think any of that money is actually going to be
It's
spent?
going to the warlords. It's exactly like when we try to give aid to the South American countries and places like Venezuela. It goes to the warlords. The warlords grow fat and rich off it, and then no one else gets a damn thing.
Like he is just throwing money at them, which they are going to use to commit more acts of terror. And
Not to mention, if they ever do become stable enough while they're under this regime, that knife is going to be sailing into our necks. In that's assuming that it hasn't already begun to, because places like Europe and the UK keep importing Muslims.
yeah, and people have seen how much global multiculturalism has failed when they start seeing all these pro-Palestine rallies cheering on the attacks in these Western countries. And I believe I even saw a recent interview with I think it was Henry Kissinger, who said that like mass immigration has been an absolute disaster. And I'm like, no shit.
Yeah, give the man a cookie. He passes the basic common sense test.
And I've already seen Democrat politicians talking about possibly accepting refugees from Gaza, and I'm like, these
No,
stupid bastards are going to get people killed.
again, I hate to. I guess it's fitting given what we talked about last week, but fall of the Roman Empire, anyone? We don't need Roman citizens to do Roman citizen things. We can just import barbarians from Gaul. Oh no, the barbarians from Gaul are using the training and resources that we gave them to topple our empire. Whoever could have seen this coming? Derp.
Like that's not like just the only problem. Like we have a very open southern border, and we've already caught terrorists on the FBI watch list attempting to sneak in through there. And God only knows how many that have snuck in that we didn't catch. And so now, and so now you could have a lot of refugees from Gaza instead of being brought in as refugees through the proper channels, just sneak through the border by going through South America and up to Mexico.
Not to mention the looseness of the screening. Um, Again, this is the biggest problem in places like Europe and the UK, because Mama Merkel and Guy Verhofstadt said open the gates. Um, Now literally you have rape epidemics in places like Rotherham that it's politically incorrect to talk about because we couldn't possibly be seen as xenophobic or racist or whatever. Never mind that the people we're letting in actually are xenophobic and racist and ideologically theocratic. Like literally every negative talking point they have against traditionalistic Christianity, which I'm not a big fan of myself, don't get me wrong, but literally every straw man, hysterical, theocracy in the waiting argument they have against the more wacky fundamentalist streams of Christianity is more true of the fundamentalists of Islam, and they're more warlike and more motivated to act on it, and yet Christianity does anything wrong, it's theocracy. Islam does anything wrong, for some reason we just ignore the fact that they actually are every ounce of theocracy that the same people are worried about the West turning into via Christianity somehow.
And the thing is, like, even when like many Western countries were deeply Christian, you rarely, if ever, saw this level of barbarism.
Because for all of its many faults, and many times it's been used as the catalyst for war, it isn't warlike at its inception unless you go strictly by the Old Testament. Whereas there really is very little divide between the Old Testament way of doing things and the way that the Quran does things, full stop. Meaning that literally the worst part of Bronze Age warfare is the thing that they try to replicate. And even when they fail to go full Bronze Age and still just wind up during, like, crusade style stuff, the medieval crusades were a nightmare, guys. And it's 2020 goddamn 3. I know we all make fun of the current year um, mentality and so on, but it is somewhat startling that there is a ninth century warfare tactic going on in 2023. Don't get me wrong.
Like, I think it's time that we've talked about the effect this has had in our own country because, like I've said before, there have been multiple pro-Palestinian protests cropping up, and a lot of people are getting a real splash in the face of ice cold water because they're starting to realize that a lot of their hard left friends are out of their goddamn minds.
Yeah, if you ever needed a piece of evidence that we live in the most absurd of all timelines, not the worst of all timelines, but certainly the most absurd of all timelines, the most vocal pro-Palestine voices in our day and age are left-leaning, millennial, and Zoomer, gay people, and or people of other social justice affiliated minorities, and so on. And no, that's not me criticizing minorities, that's me criticizing the ideology of social justice and critical theory and grievance studies and basically the entire Hegelian wing of philosophy when all is said and done.
Milton, are you familiar with what happened at Harvard?
Oh god, what happened?
Okay, so after the attacks took place, a number of student organizations at Harvard signed a joint letter in support of Palestine and the attacks. And a lot of people got really freaked out about that. And, you know, there was, a lot of very wealthy donors saying, shut this shit down or we're pulling our funding. There was also a lot of Jewish organizations that were denouncing Harvard,
I
and there's more. A lot of a lot of Fortune 500 companies got a list of the students who were in these organizations and said, "We will never hire you."
I would like that honestly, as extreme as that looks on the outside, that is probably the bare minimum. I
There's
would be
also a
if I were Harvard, I would be like annulling the degrees of anyone who did that, frankly. You
actually that's
you have
not like
been anti-educated. You have been subverted entirely.
yeah. I mean, well, where do they think they got this ideology from?
Well, that's the problem. It's again, it's not just the enemy at the gate that for some reason has been left open. That's the problem. It's the it's the love of it's the love of foreignness for its own sake. I believe the term that I'm not sure if he came up with the term oikophobia, but Dr. Randall McCam was the first place I had heard the word oikophobia. But that is essentially what it is. It's a combination of like literal like noble savage exoticism, like the love of the foreign and the exotic for its own sake in a hipstery kind of sense. But it's also a sheer just oikophobic hatred for anything that you see as um normal or again oikophobia is fear of same just like xenophobia is fear of different. um but it's basically a we hate our own civilization so much that any alternative must be better. And it's also a child's understanding um of different cultures that honestly I think the reason why this is so widespread in the millennial and zoomer generations is because, and I've maintained this theory for a long time, a lot of people in my generation on the left got their start being free thinkers by giving Islam and Muslims a chance as a counterbalance to the Bushite warmongering era. And so to them, to even contemplate distancing themselves from Islam or Muslims is so emotionally anathema to them that they will literally self-destruct before they think of it. Also, it must be said that our education system is not helping because we humanitarian wash every other culture.
There was a bit more that happened. I believe there was a teacher who also came out and uh, and supported Palestine, and also there was actually, I believe, like this video billboard bus that came around and had like the pictures of the students who signed the letter saying, "This is who these people are." So yeah, those people are getting burned, and there was actually a pro-Palestine group asking for donations to support the students because people are bullying them.
I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of doxing. I'm not a fan of blacklisting. I'm not a fan of censoring. I'm not a fan of any of that shite.
Okay, no, but let me ask you something real quick. Is it doxing if you sign your name to this letter saying this is what I support?
No, but that's what I was getting to. The thing is, I'm not a fan of any of those things. But on some level, there has to be a fuck around and find out principle.
I
Th-
think
th-
we're there.
this is them fucking around, and if they find out in the way they want to find out, i.e., if Palestine wins this fight, we will all be fighting out because of their stupidity. And no, thank you. I really don't want to be simultaneously thrown off a roof because I'm gay and beheaded because I'm a practitioner of sorcery. So, um, no thanks. Like
Well,
there is
I'm a Christian dude. My head will be rolling right along with you.
like there is absolutely no good side to this. And again, it's not because I'm opposed to Islam or opposed to Muslims. I know of Muslim scholars who are perfectly reasonable. I know of Islamic intellectuals who are perfectly reasonable. Majid Nawaz, Imam Tuidi. There was a third one that was a woman that I can't think of the name of right now. But there are reasonable Muslims, and I still think that on the ground, the majority of Muslims are human, are reasonable, are perfectly sane individuals. But because their civilization is so befucked by this literal ninth century barbarism, which made a resurgence in the 70s. Again, for a while there, it looked like the Islamic world was going to calm the fuck down and be more or less the same as any other Western country. But after the US and our cohorts went in there and started meddling with the foreign policy because of the war or because of the oil, um, it only emboldened the radical traditionalists. And then the radical traditionalists, because they were willing to go full ninth century warfare, took over everything, leaving most of the Muslim people actually to be entirely fucked, along with everyone else that the theocrats try to fuck with. There
Like,
would there would be a 9/11 for every major city in the West if these groups had their druthers. and that's being conservative, actually. I think that there would be a 9/11 on every street in every major city if these people truly had their brothers.
The thing is, like, all these supporters who just went to, you know, back these people all the way, no matter what horrific acts they commit. The end result for them is going to be the same end result if they actually achieve communism. Like, we supported you, yes, thank you. Now face the wall.
Yes. Well, actually, no. It will be bend over so we can remove your head with the sword. It's not even it's not even face the wall. It's you will be beheaded now.
Like, you you literally have nothing to gain and everything to lose by your activism.
Well, I think, and I know I beat this drum too much, but I think it's once again down to the intellectual's ability to view things only in the abstract. And in the abstract, they think to themselves on some level, our ideologies are inherently superior to their ideologies. That means that our ideologies will always inherently win because the best ideology always finds its way through somehow. It's literally they think they can morally shame the terrorists who come to their house looking to shoot and or behead them.
Yeah, I just really think about how screwed these people, how in such a bad position these people have put themselves. If Israel wins, then the exact same thing is going to happen. It's going to happen to them. What happened to the hardware students because, well, Israel won and they supported Palestine. Here's the thing: if Palestine wins, congratulations, you're next.
Yeah, fall of the Roman Empire again. It, it maybe it is because we recently covered the whole thing with regards to that, but it really does feel like you have the overindulgent Roman aristocrats welcoming the Gauls with open arms, and then they're surprised when the Gauls decide, "Oh, hey, you know how you conquered us violently, and we didn't particularly like you. Well, we never actually got over it, and you gave us all this military training and all this weaponry. So, please face the marble wall now."
Like, I think it's like they like Hamas and Hezbollah and a lot of these radical groups make their hatred for America very well known in a lot of other Western countries. And
And all the SJWs and company can see is, wait, you hate America and the West too? Deus fall, brother. Let us end the American imperialism. Meanwhile, the Muslim goes, wait, end imperialism? No, 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 no. What we need is different imperialism,
yeah,
theocratic imperialism,
yes,
haram or halal imperialism.
yeah, they don't look at these people as friends. They just look at them as useful idiots. Like, these people have progressed so far, they have literally put themselves into a no-win position.
When you hate traditionalism so much that you elect an Islamic theocracy, when you hate traditionalism so much you Chad yes Sharia.
And I've actually seen videos of a lot of people have identified the kidnapped victims from the attack on Israel, and they've been putting up posters in public spaces saying that, hey, these are the people that are still being held hostage, which is terrible. And I almost am sure that these people are going to be either slowly killed or tortured, and we should do everything in our power to get them back. But there have been people who've been putting up posters of them, and then activists going around. These are Muslim activists going around and ripping down the posters of these kidnapped victims. Like, do you have any idea just how horrible this makes you look?
I I don't think they do. I think they're so convinced that their worldview is the one true worldview that they actually do believe that whatever differences that Muslims have with them can be smoothed over, and that they actually will be able to morally shame the crazy. Like, again, these people constantly beat the war drum over right-wing radicalization, theocratic radicalization, traditionalist radicalization, and yet they stand the most right-wing traditionalist culture basically on Earth at the moment. Like, there is no one more demonstrably right-wing or demonstrably theocratic or demonstrably traditionalist the than the furthest right of the Muslim terrorists. Like, for all that the stupidity of the Western traditionalists is stupid, at the worst and most absurd of the like Western traditionalists, you get let's all be neo-Luddite quasi Amish and live like it's 3 centuries ago. For compare that to the most traditionalistic of the Islamists, and you get let's all live. Or actually, no, it's not even a let's all live. Let us good Muslims live like it's the 9th century, while we slowly and painfully torture and exterminate literally everyone and everything else as heretical and haram.
Now, there was actually a very recent incident. I believe it occurred just last night, actually, where there was reportedly a rocket that demolished a Christian hospital in Gaza, and initially nobody knew who was responsible. The Palestinians were blaming Israel. The Israelis were blaming Hamas.
Fog of war
And
in a fog of war, as it
yeah,
does.
but recent information has come out, and before this information came out, like a lot of pro-Palestinian groups, like in the Muslim world and in the West, were outraged about this. That many of them rioted. I believe the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon was actually attacked, but it has later come out that um, well, the way this story was portrayed was completely inaccurate. The hospital was not destroyed, and there was a rocket, but I believe it was fired by Hamas, and the hospital was not the intended target. What actually happened was that it malfunctioned and then crashed into the hotel parking lot. And actually, on Andy Nose's X, now formerly Twitter feed, I actually saw a video that reported to be of the hospital. And yes, there was damage to the parking lot, and there were many, many cars destroyed. But the hospital itself appeared to be, for the most part, undamaged, at least from the
Okay,
outside.
that's good. I mean, small mercies and small victories, I suppose.
But you see how these things can be quickly used for propaganda purposes, and people get so riled up and they act without thinking before proper information even comes out.
Well, and let's actually talk about that for a minute, because for all that we have rightfully, in my opinion, extolled the reasons why you should definitely be afraid, there is another side to this story, which is a lot of people will use this as an excuse to go kill them all, but God sort them out. Um, but the thing is, it must be said that the people who suffer the most under Muslim edicts are Muslims themselves, and this isn't a oh the women's blah 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 or oh the poor minorities blah blah blah. Even the straightest and most patriarchal of the male people in under Islam, if they don't have a sultan's wealth behind them, are also victimized. And don't ever forget that the majority of the armies in wars like this are men and young boys.
Also, many of which or if not most, are conscripted.
against their will and basically literally used as cannon fodder.
Yeah,
The,
like
the one of the biggest tragedies of suicide bombing is, of course, yes, the collateral damage and the loss of life in general, but the person who does it has so foregone their humanity that they literally think that they are more useful as a piece of incendiary kindling than a living human being.
I have seen like some of these street interviews, and I gotta say, the you know, radical indoctrination, like in Gaza, that it starts from the ground up. Like little kids are being taught this, and it just continues all the way up.
Yeah, and yet, for those that actually do have their heads screwed on somewhat straight, I will bet money. I would bet every cent that I have to my name that 90%, if not higher, of the moral outrage, whenever it actually hits a pitch enough to warrant some moral outrage, will be, look how they treat the women. And yet, no one will care about the mountains upon mountains of exploded, bloody, red smears that used to be boys and men. No one will care. And it sickens me. Because yes, no one under Islam has a good time of it. Everyone under Islam, especially the more radical varieties of it, are dehumanized and treated like it's still the ninth century. But while no one under Islam has a good time of it, if you were in the thick of it, you would probably still be better off as a woman than a man. Because for all that rape is a terrible, horrible, really bad, no good thing, um, you're still alive. You're still raising your own children. You're still having an influence on the next generation. And usually, if you behave, and again, I realize I'm painting a oversimplified picture here, but usually, if you behave, you will be treated as well as they can manage to treat you, which again isn't very well because everyone suffers under hyper authoritarian, hyper religious, hyper traditionalistic regimes. But if you had a choice, if you could choose your gender in an actual meaningful way and not in the trans sense, because that would probably result in you getting thrown off a building, um, you would probably still be better off as a woman than a man under these circumstances, because most women will be offered some vector of safety. It may be under extremely negative circumstances, it may be under horrifying circumstances from where we're standing, but it's still a luxury that men are not offered and boys are not offered. They kill and torture all the men and boys. They leave at least a portion of the women alive to scheme another day.
Yeah. And I want to talk briefly here about the politics behind this whole thing because I'm sure you can imagine many of the you know globalist, you know, interventionists, unipartists are pushing for war funding and for retaliation. Um,
hmm
uh, Lindsey Graham of the GOP said that we should level Gaza, and I just gotta say, shut the fuck up, you idiot.
This will not do anything but make the problem worse. You asshole. It's what we've done for at least 50 years, closing in on 80 years, and it has done nothing but exacerbate the problem over and over and over and over and over and over again.
And I believe AOC said that we should do surgical strikes against Hamas, which is actually surprising because she is, on the opposite side of this issue from her fellow members in the quote unquote squad, which is Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Anna Presley, who are very much pro Palestine in this
Well,
regard.
I
But
mean, why would Elon Omar and Rashida Tlaib have a pro-Muslim bias and an anti-Israel bias? Hmm, I wonder. I wonder. Oh, how I wonder.
I believe Rashida Tlaib actually has a Palestinian flag outside of her office in Congress.
Why would someone who willingly adorns themselves with a Palestinian flag be pro-Palestine under these circumstances? Gee, I wonder. Survey says common sense, you dumbass.
Like I said, like the only like tiniest sliver of light through all this is that now these people have shown who they truly are, and there is no one who can claim ignorance of these people anymore. If you support them, you know all exactly what they're about and how far they're willing to go. And like if you support them, you are signed up for all of this now.
The saving grace of these people for the longest time has been always, oh, don't worry about their hatred for the Western world. Don't worry about their hatred for the first world. It's totally ideologically consistent and totally won't result in self destruction. Um, Submitted for your approval this entire rigmarole. The the most Antifa minded of the Voshites are on the Muslim side because they actually do prioritize foreign violent revolution for its own sake. Never mind all the theocratic baggage that it's going to come with, as long as the alleged Western Christian patriarchy gets toppled somehow. Somehow they think they're going to win. They can't even manage to make the Chaz work for more than a month, but somehow they think that against people whose entire culture is based on guerrilla warfare, stealth warfare, and improvised explosives, they think they're going to win. And moreover, they think they're going to be able to morally shame the fight into not happening in the first place when it does inevitably happen.
Uh, it's not just the morons in Congress who are having their true natures revealed. There was a national organization that a lot of people supported in the past that are now revealing itself to be completely insane, as many people said it was. Do you know which
Mhm.
organization I'm referring to?
Oh dear. Wait, the list is so long of potential candidates I couldn't possibly guess.
Begins with a B.
Oh God. Black Lives Matter?
Yep. Uh, After the attacks, um, they posted a picture in support of the paraglider troops that invaded Israel and participated in the attack. And a lot of people online who are these like quote unquote anti-racist radicals, a lot of them have been talking about decolonization for a long time now. And after the attacks, they said, "What did you think decolonization looked like?"
Because these people actually believe that the Western classically liberal stroke libertarian stroke capitalistic worldview is so oppressive to people that not only are they justified to do violent uprising that would make the French Revolution look like a blood drive, but it is the morally correct and inevitable outcome of same, according to these people.
hold on. But yeah. So I think this may be the inciting event that actually causes the American left to crumble because like
I
these people are are the hardcore base of the left and the Democrats, and now everyone else in the country is seeing how absolutely insane they are. But you can't win an election though with only your base. So if the politicians, play to their base, they're going to reject the vast majority of the
it's
moderates.
it's also not like they weren't in a nerfed position to begin with, because let's face it, Biden is literally being Tuesday or weekend at Bernie's around everywhere. And let's face it, the only person who has a political pulse at this, or actually no, there are two people with political pulses, and frankly, I would like to see them be a unified ticket, and um that's Trump and Ramaswamy. And mind you, I'm speaking as someone who's nominally politically on the left. I'm a classical liberal in principle and a social democrat in terms of policy, but I'm looking at the field, and unless like Tulsi and Yang run a ticket, and they're not even members of the Democratic Party anymore, um, a Trump Ramaswamy ticket is the best case scenario here.
Yeah. Just so for a bit of a clarification, you said you're a social democrat, not a member of the Democrat Socialists of America, who have also come out in support of Palestine.
Yes, and this is why it is important for me to constantly make the distinction between social democracy in the like Scandinavian style and democratic socialism. Unlike Bernie, who seems to conflate the two, and his conflation of the two is what gave rise to people like the Squad and so on. It's why, despite having voted for Bernie both times, I I basically find him to be useless. Not only because he inflamed people like AOC and so on, but also because, in addition to inflaming people far to the left of even him, he also cucked to the establishment both times. He is absolutely useless as a politician.
Yeah, and uh, I say Biden is the absolute last person we want in charge of America during such a turbulent time because the
He's
guy
not
can barely
capable. The man is
the
a
guy can barely
corpse.
speak. He does not project strength, and whatever our enemies see him, attempt to act tough. Like I find it hard not to laugh at the guy. God only
He's
knows what our enemies are doing.
he's not medically lucid is the biggest problem. Like, even if he were at least somewhat lucid, like a George Bush style figure, that would at least be something, but he's not medically lucid. The man needs to be in a like medical surveillance, high end, because politician and resources and what have you, but he needs to be at home. He needs to be on whatever stipend the politicians get for the rest of their lives. He does not need to be in power. And the only problem I have with excising him from power is that we would be left with Kamala the cop,
Yeah.
which it's hard to get worse than a corpse who literally is guided by teleprompter, but Kamala the cop is worse.
What's worse, a corpse being manipulated like a puppet, or an alive person with no brain?
And no soul, and the bedside manner of a goddamn Bengal tiger.
You know, if I gotta say, if this election coming up cannot happen soon enough, and here's the thing: if Biden wins, like I had no problem accepting that he won last time, considering how much people hated Trump. But if he wins now, I
But
will
again,
struggle
again,
to wrap my head around.
the only two sane options at the moment are Trump and Ramaswamy. I would love to live in a world where Ro Khanna ran, or Tulsi Gabbard ran, or Andrew Yang ran, or like there are other options that I would be willing like. And on the like right wing side, I would be glad to vote for Rand Paul. But none of those people are running at the moment. The only three options are RFK, which I don't hate his platform, but it also seems to me that he's course correcting and faking to win in the general and is going to run far more to the left than he's actually proposing. Um, or Trump and or Ramaswamy. I would gladly vote for Ramaswamy, even though the fact that Trump is literally the public enemy number one tells me that tells me that Trump would be a more effective candidate, and I would gladly vote. The best case scenario, in my opinion, would be if when Ramaswamy eventually drops out, he becomes Trump's running mate. That is the win state. But like those two people, three if you count RFK Jr., are the only people with a political pulse, the only people who could reasonably be voted for. Period.
And we're talking about funding, you know, a brand new conflict. Meanwhile, we've been funding Ukraine for like the last year, and so like has it gone up to 1 billion?
Yeah. Time for geopolitics. Favorite game show. Choose your apocalypse.
Yeah, it's just like we cannot keep stretching ourselves thin like this. Everybody knows our economy is in a bad shape, no matter what bullshit the federal government tries to tell you. And giving money to a new conflict, like this is going to make everything that's already bad, that already has people struggling, and it's going to make it so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And the really sad thing is, neither of these conflicts in and of themselves are really that major of a deal because let's be real, Israel and Palestine are at each other's throats all the time, whether it's been declared or not anyway. And Russia and Ukraine have been irrelevant this entire time. It's one of the reasons why it flabbergasted me that we focus so much on them. But basically what you have here is a potential death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like nothing, none of these are major issues in and of themselves, but taken as a whole, again, it's a choose your apocalypse situation.
yeah, and God only knows what could happen if China decides to kick off with Taiwan.
Again, we find ourselves not in the darkest timeline, not in the most evil timeline, not in the most tragic timeline, but certainly in the most absurd of all timelines.
Could we officially admit that the people who voted for Biden voted wrong? I know people usually say that there is no right or wrong in voting, but in this situation, I firmly believe that no, there was a right and wrong choice, and you voted wrong.
Well, and the sad thing is, most of them knew they were voting wrong because on the like base of the left, on the like Bernie Bro slash like AOC supporting side of the left, they all knew that Biden was a barely competent person with Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia, and yet they still were like, person with dementia better than Orange Man because reasons.
I actually saw a video. I forget where it's from, but it was this guy who was a hardcore anti-Trump guy in 2020, and he said, "I didn't like Donald Trump, but he was right, and because we did not like the messenger, we killed the message, and now we're reaping the consequences of that."
Huzzah! He can be taught. And this is why, despite being, as I said, classically liberal in principle, a social democrat in terms of policy, um, I never viscerally hated Trump or considered him a fascist or a racist or any of the other absurd things they claimed him to be, because there are enough valid criticisms of Trump that I would prefer if we had just focused on the valid criticism and treated him like every other goddamn politician. But instead of that, it was Trump is a fascist, inaccurate claim. Trump is racist, inaccurate claim. Trump is unhinged, inaccurate. Like the thing that turned me off to my cohorts on the left more than anything was how much their arguments relied on moralistic hysteria, dehumanization, radicalization, and falsehoods. Like, if your argument holds water, you don't need to support it with lies or mistaken falsehoods. It has always been the principle that I operate with. If you can make an argument, you don't need to say wrong shit or irrational shit or illogical shit. And yet, that was 90% of the 4 years of Trump's presidency was he is the worst, he is the second coming of Hitler or the second coming of any given dictator, and he has no decorum, and he's a fascist, and he's racist, and all the other things. Which none of that is accurate or true or even rational.
Speaking of falsehoods, you remember when various government agencies, from the FBI to the CIA to the DHS to the NSA, came out and said that America's biggest threat was homegrown white supremacy? Now, given the events of the past few weeks, does anybody give a damn about white supremacists?
Not to mention that claim was absurd on its face to begin with, because white supremacy is not resurgent. Fascism is not resurgent. Um, Traditionalism is somewhat resurgent, but that's only because social justice is so unpalatable that some people would prefer traditionalism. By contrast, I'm more than willing to say both of y'all can sit down, shut up, and go the fuck away already, and leave the populist libertarians and classical liberals to figure out how to solve the mess you made. But
I would argue that there are some aspects of traditionalism that I would like to see a resurgence of.
I guess it sort of depends on what you're defining as traditionalist. Like, what I mean is the Gavin McGinnises and the Matt Walshes. For all that Matt Walsh sometimes can say right things, because again he's dealing with absurd people. The video games are for children, / they're violent, / they're immoral for some other reason, or the anime is satanic attitude, the literal satanic panicking going on and shit.
Yeah, that's just dumb.
Like, no, guys, just like, you lost in the 90s specifically because of this shit, and you were right to lose. Just because social justice is also stupid doesn't mean that family value traditionalism becomes automatically more palatable, or even evangelical satanic panicking is any more viable. Again, I am universally opposed to any kind of authoritarian moralism. It doesn't matter what direction it's pointing. I don't want social justice, but I don't want traditionalism either. I want the good old-fashioned irreverence and freedom of expression of the 90s. The 90s, as absurd as it seems to me as someone who grew up in the 90s was a golden era. We didn't appreciate it as a golden era when we had it, but in retrospect, the 90s was a golden era, and I want it back.
The part of traditionalism I'm talking about is, marriage having, actually valuable, being actually valuable and being respected. Um, you know, two-parent households. The ability to, actually support a family.
See, I think
returning.
Yeah, I think the solution to that is not traditionalism, it's men's rights. We need to do for men in the coming century what we did for women in the previous one. And when the two are on equal footing again, the world will finally become more sane.
We don't need to do for men what feminism did for women. We need to do for men the things that ought to be done, and correctly, because feminism was a massive mistake. And
Well, I think it's a mistake to give the women's rights to tie the women's rights movement to feminism. That is the number one. in the same way as it doesn't make sense to tie BLM to the civil rights movement. What I mean is we need to do for men what the women's rights movement did for women and what the civil rights movement did for black people in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, we have to we have to make sure that it doesn't metastasize into like another radical group of
Masculinism,
assholes. Yeah, like
the
with
cult of Andrew Tate.
yeah, like whenever the women's rights groups and the civil rights groups accomplish what they set out to accomplish, all the reasonable, rational people decided, great, now let's go home. And then all that was left was a bunch of assholes who made it literally their entire life's mission to campaign on these issues. And now we have the groups that we have. I just don't want this to turn into that.
Yeah, here's the good thing about that. The reason I think that happened with particularly the women's rights movement is because we are an inherently gynocentric species, because we already intuitively privilege women as much as we possibly can. The good news is because men's rights is, for varying degrees, so counterintuitive, it will be a miracle if we even get to the level of the women's rights movement or the civil rights movement. And once we get there, it's going to be a hell of a time to just keep it there. I don't think it is possible on a psychologically human level for men's rights to get as out of hand as women's rights did, and
Well,
as the civil rights movement turned into BLM and so on.
well, here's the thing. There have actually been a lot of states that have been doing a lot of great work in the areas of men's rights. So if ever there was a time to make a large push, like now would be the time, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
no, now is the time. Now is the equivalent of the 20s for women or the 50s for black people. I'm not saying it's a lost. I'm certainly not saying it's a lost cause or it's inevitable that we'll fail or anything. What I'm saying is, I wouldn't worry so much about the rise of something like masculinism because it's going to be a hell of a hard won fight to even get to the level of the women's rights movement or the civil rights movement. And once we get there, it's going to be a hell of a hard won fight to keep it there. So I don't think we're as naturally predisposed to caring about men as we are to caring about women or even minorities. So I doubt that masculinism is something that we genuinely need to worry about. Or that like meninism is a thing we need to worry about. I think we'll have a hard enough time just getting to the table in terms of like the civil rights movement and so on. And once we get there, it's gonna be a hard won fight to keep it there. But that doesn't mean that we're doomed to fail or anything. It just means that we're probably never going to see a full flip to the pendulum the other way because irrespective of culture, irrespective of ideology, irrespective of um, external pressures, humans are inherently gynocentric. So all we can hope to do is balance it out and basically get in touch with our inner Neanderthals and be more egalitarian.
All right, we've been going for an hour and 8 minutes. Do you have any final thoughts regarding the Israel Palestine conflict?
The most important thing you need to remember in a war, the thing that will hopefully get it to an expedient end and or prevent it from getting really, really bad to begin with, is the people you are fighting are just as human as you. If someone somewhere can maintain that knowledge, we can actually make it out of this. If, however, you start dehumanizing each other and viewing each other as subhuman, there will be an endless torrent of blood and oceans of terror as a result.
The last thing I want to say is that you can have sympathy for the people of Gaza while also recognizing that taking them in as refugees would be an absurdly bad idea. And also beware of the fog of war, beware of things being used as propaganda, and always make sure that you have the actual verifiable details before you just buy into a story about the horrors of war. And while war is extremely horrific, you should know that the events that you're talking about actually took place.
Yeah.
Everybody, I've been Mystery.
I have been Dalton Hardman, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Man. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.